Dr. Bonocolus's Devil by Terry Jones. Dr. Bonocolus was a very clever man. He lived a long time ago in a distant land. He was very proud of his learning, and he enjoyed performing in public debates where he could show how much cleverer he was than anyone else. One day, however, Dr. Bonoculus decided to sell his soul to the devil. He read in a big book a certain number of magic spells, and late that night he lit a candle in his study, drew some lines on the floor, and summoned the devil to appear before him. There was a flash and a puff of smoke and the smell of brimstone, and for just a moment he thought he could hear the roaring of hellfire. But before he could change his mind, there in front of him stood a short gentleman in gray with a pen tucked behind his ear. "You're not the devil," cried Dr. Bonoculus. No," replied the figure in gray. "The devil is extremely busy at this moment in time. I'm his official representative. Now, if you'd just like to give me your details, we can get on with the sale." And he opened a large leather book that he was carrying. "Wait a moment," said Dr. Bonoculus. "I wanted to see the devil himself. I don't want to sell my soul to some half-witted underling." "The devil does apologize most sincerely," said the gentleman in gray, "but it's just a question of feasibility. If you don't want to do the deal with me, that's quite understandable, but we'll just have to let the sale go. We have more than enough to choose from as it is. It's a buyer's market at the moment, don't you know?" In the end, Dr. Bonoculus agreed to sell his soul to the devil's representative on what seemed very favorable terms. For 30 years, the devil would give Dr. Bonoculus unlimited wealth, fame, and magical powers. At the end of 30 years, Dr. Bonoculus would have to sit and play backgammon with the devil forever. Dr. Bonoculus made a cut on his arm and was just about to sign in his own blood when the devil's representative stopped him. He looked around rather furtively and then lowered his voice and said, "Look, officially, I shouldn't be telling you this, but, well, are you quite sure you know what you're doing?" "Of course I am," said Dr. Bonoculus. "You forget I'm the cleverest man in the world. I've thought out exactly what I will do with my 30 years, and after that the devil can torture me as much as he likes. I've worked it out as a mathematical equation, and the worst pain he could inflict on me will not outweigh the amount of pleasure I will be able to cram into those 30 years. "He may not torture you," said the devil's representative. "Then so much the better," said Dr. Bonoculus. "It may be much worse than torture." "Impossible," cried Dr. Bonoculus. "I've thought about every conceivable thing he could do to me, and I'm prepared for anything." The devil's representative glanced over his shoulder and lowered his voice even more. "Look," he said, "I know you're the cleverest man in the world right now, but no matter what you've imagined, I can tell you it will be worse." "I can't believe it," said Dr. Bonoculus, and he dipped his pen into the blood from his arm and signed his name in the big book and on 2 contracts. Then the devil's representative went away, and for 30 years Dr. Bonoculus became not only the cleverest man in the world, but also the richest and the most respected and the most admired. Naturally, he told no one about his deal with the devil, and everywhere he was revered for the brilliance of his mind, the sharpness of his wit, and the depth of his understanding. He learned every language in the world, and there was no branch of science or art at which he did not become a master. Finally, though, his 30 years were up and he had to go down to hell to face the devil who was now his master. He had prepared himself well for his ordeal, however. He had studied every existing portrait of the devil and had steeped himself in every picture of evil, ugliness, and horror in order that he would not be aghast at the devil's appearance. As he was taken down into hell by numerous nasty little creatures who pulled his hair and tugged his clothes, he felt quite cheerful and confident that he could cope with the worst that the devil could do. To tell the truth, he felt quite proud of himself, for he had been master of the world while he lived, and now he was prepared to submit to one who was greater than himself. Indeed, he flattered himself that the devil might appreciate his fine wit and intelligence, and even find some use for his talents. At length, Dr. Bonocolus was brought to the devil's audience chamber. The devil's throne was standing there empty, surrounded by a host of ugly creatures, so evil in their appearance that even Dr. Bonocolus began to feel uneasy. Then a scaly monster, whose smell was so loathsome that it made the doctor feel sick, slouched towards the throne and put out a grasping hand towards the doctor, so that he suddenly trembled and was gripped by a fear of something unimaginable. And an earthly voice croaked, "Dr. Bonocolus, prepare to meet the devil himself." Even Dr. Bonocolus felt a little weak at the knees and a little apprehensive, remembering what the devil's representative had said to him all those years ago. No matter what you've imagined, it could be worse. Suddenly there was a flash, and the throne was engulfed in smoke. Dr. Bonocolus braced himself, and there he was, face to face with the devil, his new master. Dr. Bonocolus's jaw dropped and he went cold with horror. The devil's representative had been right, of course, but it wasn't the hideousness of the devil's features, nor even the cold brutality of that face, that was worse than any torture to Dr. Bonocolus. It was the appalling realization as he gazed into the devil's eyes that the devil was clearly stupid. "Of course," cried Dr. Bonocolus. "It's so obvious, but it was so too late. The cleverest man in the world had sold his soul to a fool." Sometimes being so smart that you think you know everything can lead you in bad ways and into a lot of trouble.